suffer from the God delusion? Professor Richard Dawkins is really worried that you do, and he thinks you've been brainwashed by evil, wicked people who want you to believe in something which is not true. Well, his book has become a bestseller, so lots of people rather like the idea, but is it true? Let's chat about that in the chat room, and the person doing the chatting is the Dean of Sydney, Philip Jensen. G'day, Philip.
I'm a child abuser, according to Mr. Dawkins'
Because
book.
you teach people about God.
Well, I teach children.
Right.
And in fact, I've had official complaint because I taught at Christmas time that there were angels who made a declaration,
And someone complained about that.
reported me to different organisations about child abuse because I publicly said what was philosophically impossible.
I mean, at this stage,
abuse, apparently.
Right, in the chat room, I've now run out of words, I have to say. That leaves me breathless. Someone complained, Christmas carols are full of angels, and someone complained because you talked about angels to children.
That's right. Because I didn't tell them that it was all mythology and nonsense.
So in other words, unless we adopt their point of view and their philosophy, we're evil.
That's right.
Okay. You feel angry about that?
No, a little bemused at first. I couldn't work out what the person was on about. And then subsequently to that, I read Richard Dawkins' book and I realised the man who complained obviously had just read Richard Dawkins' book because he used the same language.
Right. So it has been on the bestseller list for a long time, so it is significant in that sense.
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, we can't be unhappy because there's not censorship. I mean, they get to say whatever they like, don't they?
I think the censorship issue is really interesting and important. We now have uncensored pornography, basically. I mean, the only tip of the iceberg in censorship in that area is you can't have pedophilia on your computer. The police will come.
But you can have anything else and you won't lose your job.
No, anything else and everything else is now permissible. In other words, you're allowed any amount of garbage. That's perfectly right. But serious debate is still being censored. And I'm against censorship, always been against censorship. But I think garbage should be recognised as garbage and the smell of it should indicate that it needs to be thrown out. But the serious debate needs to be open. Now, I don't think we have purposeful governmental censorship of serious debate. It's not like that. However,
it's more kind of a tide or something.
It's a tide. It's not even economics. You know, there's a very interesting book by Michael Medved came out a few years ago called Hollywood versus America,
yes,
in which he demonstrates that the movies that make money don't get followed up with similar movies.
My memory is Medved said G movies make heaps of money.
Much more money than some of the R movies that are around, but there is a particular agenda running Hollywood, which he demonstrates in that very interesting book. Very interesting how he demonstrates that the thing that's driving is an agenda of certain key stakeholders. Now, I think that censorship is alive and well on this kind of issue. You can't get the secular bookshops to run Christian books or to hold Christian books. You can't get the newspapers to review them.
So if a Christian publisher goes along to a secular bookshop and says, I've got this book written by an Oxford professor which answers Richard Dawkins, they'll say, haven't got the shelf space, sorry.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And you don't get it reviewed in the newspapers. You don't get they don't get equal time on the ABC. I mean, I think the ABC's exhibition on Dawkins is astonishing. Every review in a serious journal or paper that has come out about Dawkins' book has panned it. And yet the ABC gives us 2 hours of television giving Mr. Dawkins a platform. You don't get the alternative. See, there are alternative books. Here's one by a man called Andrew Wilson, which is a really useful and helpful little book that's came out, that's got all kinds of answers to it about the deluded by Dawkins. But here's another one, The Dawkins Delusion by Alistair McGrath. Now, he's a professor at Oxford.
Yes, and he has a PhD in microbiology as well as theology. He knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, science... Yes. He has as many qualifications in science as Professor Dawkins. Same position but it's a book that you don't even hear about.
Yes.
Let alone give him 2 hours of ABC time to say what the answers are.
In fact, it's the second one he's done. He did an earlier one called Dawkins' God, in which he went through Dawkins' arguments bit by bit and showed that the science doesn't support the philosophy. Which is, the two just don't connect. He does his science, but then the philosophy is not supported by it.
That's right. Now, it's not censorship, but it is censorship in a sense. When only one side of a debate can be heard, and it is promoted publicly, well, it is a censorship that is taking place, which is a worry. I don't want to censor, though, a Richard Dawkins. I'm really glad he writes. See, one of my friends has become a Christian late last year. Their spouse gave them a copy of Richard Dawkins because the spouse is a little, I think, upset.
Yep.
And my friend was a little alarmed at seeing this. By the time they'd finished reading the book, they said, well, being Christian is very sensible, isn't it? I mean, it's not a book that is very persuasive to Christians. It's a fact.
The interesting thing is, you're not particularly angry with Dawkins, but Dawkins, I think, is angry with you. There is an emotional energy behind what he's doing, isn't there?
Yeah, well, that's good. Emotional energy in a debate, in a discussion's a good thing. I can get some now, you know. I mean, it's a good thing. And he paints with the good, bold strokes, which enables you to see the argument.
Right.
Both for its strengths and its weaknesses. And some of it's very strong. He's a very clever arguer. I don't mean clever in a put-down sense there. He is clever.
And he's clever at explaining the science.
Oh, yes. And it's very well written in terms of its readability. It's a great page turner. It's not like, Mr. Hawking's, Professor Hawking's book.
Oh, yes. The most unread bestseller in the world.
Absolutely. And it is really tedious.
A short history of the universe. Short history of not reading a book is what it was.
The universe might have a short history, but that book doesn't.
I've got to say to you, a mutual friend of ours, Ross McKenzie, who is a scientist and a Christian, told me he'd read the book several times and found it quite compelling. And I thought only a scientist like Ross McKenzie could do that sort of thing.
Yeah, but he has a chair in physics, doesn't he?
Yes.
So it's up his alley. Yes, it's a very boring book. Whereas Dawkins is not like that. Dawkins is lively, interesting, arresting kind of book. And so I'm glad he's writing it. It's very important for Christians not to get upset about opposition to Christianity. I mean, if what we believe is not true, it needs to be exposed. If it is true, then we needn't fear criticism. And so it's a good thing that it's out there. It puts the gospel back onto public agenda. It's something of a compliment. I mean, you don't write... People don't write books against the belief in Moloch these days.
No.
It's a non-existence, so no one cares. In fact, the kind of splurge of books that's come out and is coming out at the moment. We've got Mr. Dawkins, Mr. Hitchens writing against us.
Robin Williams, my colleague at the ABC.
Yes.
Lovely man, Robin Williams, wrote a book called Unintelligent Design.
Yeah, that's right. And also another colleague of yours, Mr. Denton, is showing his show on Belief
television,
in God, television, which is now becoming a package that you can use in schools.
Is it really?
Yes. So, I mean, that these things are happening really shows that there's a problem taking place for the atheists in our community.
They're worried.
They're worried.
In fact, Alistair McGrath, that we mentioned earlier, also wrote a book called The Death of Atheism, in which he says that atheism is dying. Is that what these people are detecting and fighting against?
Yes. For some of it, it's good reasons, some of it's bad reasons. The religious right of America have exercised political power. Now, atheists exercise political power. That is, the humanist believes in changing humans by changing society, and change society by changing political processes. And so humanists don't send missionaries out into the difficult parts of the world. You never get a humanist leper colony. What you get is humanists in the United Nations controlling the flow of money to lepers.
Right.
And so politics is really important to them. When suddenly arises in the most powerful nation of the world a group of religious politicians, that alarms them enormously. As long as we're dormant politically, it doesn't alarm them as much. On the other hand, they're also not doing well in terms of religion in universities, religions in the society. They have believed their own ideology. It's a belief that...
They believed everything would die. That
they believed religion would die.
Yes.
And especially that as a result of science, religion would die. Because in the 19th century, under Thomas Huxley, they created an artificial war between science and religion. It was totally artificial. It was a construct of an atheist who preferred the word agnostic, attacking religion, but it wasn't even attacking religion. It was the northern industrialists attacking the dominance of Oxbridge with its classics tradition, trying to bring science to the forefront of the British nation and empire. So it's a very complex thing, but they created this false fight. Now, you can see it in false in lots of ways. For example, there's a group of Americans called the fundamentalists, and they were arguing for return to fundamental Christianity.
They're arguing against people who were anti-supernaturalist and wanted to take over
Yes.
their denominations and so on.
That's right. And they were, from them has come the word fundamentalist, which
But
now
it's
means
changed.
Narrow-minded, bigoted, unthinking, stupid.
Because it's changed since they first coined it. hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, some of them were very clever and well-educated men. One of them was a man called B.B. Warfield. He was one of the original fundamentalists. He was a Darwinian. He
Yes.
believed in Darwinian science. And so here you have one of the very fathers of modern fundamentalism who believed in evolution and Darwin and science.
I think I've read that he grew up on a property in Tennessee or Kentucky where they bred horses, and from everything he'd seen to do with breeding horses, he decided Darwin had more or less nailed the process.
Yes.
But he didn't think it had any impact on the purpose.
No, because this war was always a false and phony war.
Yes.
But the atheists thought with the rise of science, religion would disappear because they believed the two were incompatible. Now, it's been proven not to be true. So in 1914, there was a survey done of American scientists by a man, Luber, and he was not a Christian, he was an atheist, and he was astonished to find that the overwhelming preponderance of scientists actually believed in God in some form, and a large percentage believed in the God who changed things in this world in response to prayer. That's 1914. The same survey was conducted in 1996 on the same basis, and the percentage of scientists was exactly the same.
Now that's interesting because Dawkins actually claims in his book that it's declined.
Yeah.
And you're saying when you look at the hard numbers, he's wrong.
Yeah, he's wrong.
Yeah.
And on that survey, see, I read Dawkins while I was travelling around England earlier this year. It's
An entertaining read, isn't
a
it?
very entertaining read, and you think, oh no, yes, oh gee, that's clever, and so I mean it's a good read.
Yes.
But at the same time, because I can never read one book at a time, at the same time I was reading this other book by Rodney Stark called For the Glory of God. Now,
Right.
Stark's a very interesting sociologist.
He's an academic?
Yes, sociologist from America. And Stark is not a Christian, as best I know. Certainly some of the things he says about Christianity here I disagree with very strongly, so I don't see he's a Christian like I'm a Christian. But Stark looks at the rise of science, which he says comes out of Christianity, and could only come out of Christianity.
So the very fact that Christianity existed coming out of the Reformation and things like that
Yes.
is the reason why modern science arose.
Yes, you couldn't have modern science with Buddhism or with
Yes.
Hinduism or with atheism for that matter. It's actually come out of Christianity, out of monotheism is where it comes, right, as part of it. But he also writes up things like the change, the survey of scientists. So Dawkins refers to it and Stark refers to it, and I'm reading both these writers at the same time.
They're saying different
And
things.
they're saying completely different things out of the same set of statistics
Yes.
that are there. And what it means. Stark, I think, is much more persuasive as to what the whole thing is about and what is happening, and has much less of an axe to grind because he's just making observations from a sociological point of view.
Rather than arguing for a case.
Yeah, he's not arguing for or against Christianity.
If Richard Dawkins and his fellow militant atheists are right, then the people who are left within the Christian camp, they would hope the dwindling Christian camp, must be fairly stupid from their point of view. I mean, sort of people aren't too bright and haven't caught on.
That's right.
I mean, is there evidence that Christians are the thickos in society, or is there not? Look at the Christians around you, the people you know.
It's just not true. See,
Yes.
every 5 years we survey church people and we survey and we have a national census and we try and match the two. So in 2001, 13% of the people in New South Wales had university degrees. 13%. In 2001, 35% of Sydney Anglicans had university degrees.
Higher than the average.
Three times
yes.
as much, a little less,
Yes.
but almost 3 times as much. Now, I haven't seen the national census. It hasn't come out yet for 2006, or it may have, but I haven't read them. But we have now just got the figures for the Anglicans in Sydney in 2006, and the number has jumped from 35% to 41%.
So there's 41% of Sydney Anglicans who have university degrees.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, how do the Dawkins and Hitchens and the rest of this world explain? You've got all of these people with university qualifications who believe in the God of the Bible.
Yeah. And, well, Dawkins does things. He lists out all the Nobel Peace Prize winners and says, now, how many of them believe in God? And so we have the selective sample. It's a selection on the basis of the greatest scientists of our era.
Yes.
It's not a bad selection, but you might find that that group of people only has a small percentage. But even the small percentage that are there, and he mentions a few colleagues by name who are Christian, he basically says, I don't understand them.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I mean,
So he talks about
exist.
Collins, the man who ran the Human Genome Project,
Yes.
who is a Christian, has written a book saying he's a Christian, and basically Dawkins says, I can't explain this man.
And likewise Mr. Polkinghorne, who was a great scientist and who's
Yes.
left and gone into full-time ministry. And again, he just said, well, I don't understand that man, basically, because real scientists wouldn't be like that.
The picture that Richard Dawkins paints of Christianity in his book, is it what Christianity is, or does he simply not understand the whole thing?
He doesn't understand it. That's part of the problem. He so despises Christianity that he thinks the study of theology is not worthwhile.
In fact, he denies it's a subject, I think.
That's right. I mean, he says, I don't study mythology. I don't study fantasy. I mean, why should I be studying that which is not real? And so, I mean, in one sense, that's all right. I can understand that. I haven't made a careful study of hobgoblins, or you know, and I'm not really interested in studying fairies, though I dismiss them. But if I was going to write a book against them, I think I should spend some time studying whatever it is said about it, especially by those people who believe it. Whereas there are just snippets of the most ludicrous forms of Christianity that are studied and discussed, and cultural memories from his own childhood and youth, which are pictured.
Went to a school with a compulsory chapel, and that's all he remembers.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
But actually what it's about, I mean, the word faith is one that's incredible. Faith within the atheistic scientific community is irrationality.
Yes, he says faith is something without a shred of evidence. Therefore, Christianity hasn't a shred of evidence.
Yes, because Christianity is about faith. Now, that's all right, I don't mind if that's what the word means to you. It's just that means we need to cut it out of our Bibles and put in what the Greek and the Hebrew meant. And it never meant without shred of evidence. That no Christian I know, well, I suppose there are some Christians who are stupid enough to believe what the scientists say, the atheists say that Christians should believe, but Christians don't believe that. And the word faith in the Bible means trust, it means to rely, it means to depend. Now you can do that without evidence, or you can do it with evidence. I mean, that depends whether you're stupid or whether you're intelligent.
Yes, yes.
But it's got nothing to do with evidence per se. I'm relying upon my chair. I'm depending upon it. I'm sitting here trusting myself to it. That is not an irrational thing. I've sat in this chair before.
You have faith in the chair.
I studied the chair. I look, it's got 4 legs. You haven't set it up as a con with only 3 legs and one broken or something like that to make a fool of me. I mean, I look, it's the right kind of materials, it's the right strength, it's the right design. I've tested it before. I've sat in lots of chairs. It's totally reasonable for me to put my trust in this chair.
So your faith in the chair is evidence-based.
Yes, evidence-based faith is,
but Dawkins
is
can't
normal Christianity.
Can't understand evidence-based faith.
No, because Christianity is by definition, and religion is by definition, and faith is by definition superstition.
By his definition.
Yes.
Not by a dictionary definition.
No. And so if you start on that basis, well then everything you're told just gets filtered into that basis, and you get a book like this which fires volley after volley at a target that is missing. You know, I mean, for those who believe as he believes, it's a very, it's a great read. Yes, yes, yes. How do they get around that? How do they get around that?
Yes.
But for those who actually believe in the gospel, you read it saying, who are you talking about? That's nothing to do with me.
One of the reviews I read of his book said that in the end, he's preaching to the choir.
Yes.
It's the rest of the atheist society who are applauding what he's doing.
But he's trying to do something else. That is, he's trying to persuade the closet atheist or the deep-seated agnostic to come out from the closet.
Right.
And so, you know, the letter and so on of complaint about me speaking to children at Christmas about angels
Is his goal.
is his goal.
Yes.
That's
yes.
where somebody who in previous generations would have just put up with, well, they're singing about angels and the silly minister believes in it, now is writing off to the United Nations, is writing off to the government, the state government, the federal government, saying this is child abuse.
Now that's in a sense where the rubber hits the road for someone who's a Christian believer, because they might suddenly find people they're working with being more belligerent or more mocking, or
Yes.
a member of their family giving them a harder time,
Yes.
because they're being wound up by this kind of thing. So how do we deal with this? Christians who are believers, what do we do when there is this wave going through the media?
Rejoice and be glad. That's what the Bible says when various trials come upon you, then be glad. I think you'd be glad for lots of reasons. It's a crude phrase and a little harsh, but I was taught it many years ago by a friend that, you know, the dogs bark when the stones hit. So there's a sense in which it's expressing of the problem that's out there for the atheist at the moment. There's been a huge shift in the philosophical schools of academic philosophy now, whereas in the 1960s, belief in God was an impossibility in a philosophy department. Now, following from Alvin Plattinger and others, Christian philosophers are fairly common in universities.
Yeah, people
now.
like Richard Swinburne are really well respected and their arguments taken very seriously.
Very seriously. There's quite a move away, and the atheists are feeling it socially, they're feeling it politically with the religious right. I'm not for advocating the religious right. I'm not championing their cause or anything like it. I think Australia's a very different political scene to America. But I'm saying the atheists are feeling threatened. That's why we're seeing so much come out.
But what do I say to Uncle George? When Uncle George, I've read this book, I always knew you were an idiot. Now this is proof that you've got the IQ of a sea anemone, right?
Yeah. And you say, well, it's genetic, Uncle, that's right.
I can try that. You don't know Uncle George. I'm not sure I will.
I see. Well, we've got to help the threatened. And we've also got to help I don't know what you call it. Let's put it this way. Why are people so keen to read books like this? And why is there such a market? You see, we had in the last year or so the Da Vinci Code. It was a fiction. It professed to be a fiction. It claimed to be a fiction. It was written as a fiction to entertain. Thousands upon thousands of people believed it. Believed it even as fact.
Because they wanted to believe it before they got it.
I sat next to a man in an aeroplane, and he found out I was a minister, and then he said, have you read the Da Vinci Code? At that stage I said, no, I hadn't. I said, but it's a fiction, you know. Oh yes, it's a fiction, yes. But it makes you think, doesn't it? I said, well, I hope a fiction will make you think, but it doesn't make you think it's fact, does it? Oh, no. But what?
Yes.
And he just persisted with this idea that a book that he knew was a fiction actually was fact.
So maybe what I should be doing with Uncle George is not arguing with him, but asking him questions.
Yes.
And listening to him.
And listening to him. And you've got to do that with Dawkins, because Dawkins asks really hard questions.
And after I've asked him some questions and heard where he's really coming from, maybe I say to him, oh, look, I've got another book that says something else. Do you want to hear the other side of the story?
Yes, that's always worth doing. Now, there's every chance Uncle George won't want to hear the other side of the story, because Uncle George might be like many Christians, closed-minded. There are closed-minded atheists, there are closed-minded Christians. And if he is, don't be surprised.
Go away and pray for him.
Go away and pray for him. But there are books, like Professor McGrath's book that's out there, which will just go through Dawkins' arguments and just show you how wide of the mark they really are. So and that's available.
So go to a Christian bookshop.
But you've got to go to a Christian bookshop because it's censored out of other bookshops.
Right. And you
won't hear it on the ABC. And especially you won't hear it in the ABC Department of Religion.
No.
Because they are committed to irreligion. I mean, isn't it extraordinary? You finally get Christianity on there, and what do you get? You get an atheist bagging it out. And this is the Department of Religion. It's like turning to the sports department of the ABC in order to have a discussion on the philosophy of science.
Yeah, or the sports department to show how bad exercise is for you.
Yes, or how bad exercise would be even better. It's that kind of thing. You don't actually get in the department of religion. So, anti-religion.
And that's not it's not a plot, it's not a conspiracy, it's just this agenda, this wave that's flowing through.
That's fascinating too. The Dawkins book is in religion, it's not in the science department.
Yes, yes.
He wants to be a scientist because he's got no time for religion, but his book actually occupies the religion department.
Right.
Because the religion department doesn't actually have too much time for religion either.
Okay, but that's going to go on.
Talking about the ABC.
No, that's all right.
That's the kind of censorship conspiracy that we're in.
But that's the environment.
But it's not an intentional. That's the environment. It's a subconscious.
In that environment, we'll have problems with Uncle George or our teenage son Tim or whoever it is. We need to be patient.
Yes.
Listen to them.
Absolutely.
Be gentle with them.
Yes.
Pray for them.
Yes.
And if they read something else,
and maybe listen, maybe be persuaded by them. If I'm not willing to be persuaded by the other person,
got to be open.
It's not fair for me to expect them to be persuaded by me.
Right.
So I need to listen to the arguments that they are putting forward.
Yes.
But I need to know that, if they're just mouthing Dawkins' arguments, there are lots of other good books that are answering Dawkins' arguments, because they're not really hard arguments to answer, frankly.
Well, in fact, that's what you probably should do. You need to grab hold of some of those books which answer the arguments of Richard Dawkins, so that when someone or other says to you, oh, it's all been disproved now, it's all a load of rubbish, you can say, I've read this other book and there are answers. So being prepared is not a bad idea. And also being nice to the people who want to argue with you is not a bad idea. Philip Jensen, thank you for your time.
Pleasure again.
And thank you for your time on the chat room. Lots for you to chat about with your friends from the things we've discussed today, because we've just scratched the surface. But we'll see you again next time in the chat room.